Right, so I chose the topic of the sun for today because it's kind of logical, isn't it? After the nodes and the moon, the nodes are so much related to the interplay between the sun and the moon, those two cycles. So we were looking at the moon and various ways in which you can investigate how the moon is working in the chart last time. But this time, I wanted to look at the sun, and maybe we should have started with the sun. I don't know, because for me personally, that's one of the most important things that, in a way, everything else in the chart is revolving around. Like all the planets in the solar system are revolving around the sun, it really does act as some sort of a center that we all need to connect to in a as good way as we possibly can understand from our charts, in order to make everything else work in there and function with ease and with joy, instead of feeling that there is something that is blocking the energies. And maybe it's worth mentioning that none of the planets are creating their own energy, but they are serving more like lenses of the energy that is given to them by the sun. So the sun is immensely important. It does keep us together in one way or another. And if we are working well with our suns, over time, we build a sense of integrity and continuity that is not easy. It's not something that comes as a given. You know that in the beginning, in childhood, and then throughout the years of growing up and developing the personality, we connect most of the time more immediately and more easily with the moon. This doesn't mean that we work very well with the moon, but it's instinctual, it's automatic, very difficult to control. The sun is more conscious, and that's the point of it, really, building consciousness and figuring out how and what makes us distinct from everything else and everybody else that we live among. The sun is usually extremely difficult to pin down. I'm not going to be able to give you a definition that's going to work for all of you. Maybe some of you will think of it in one way, others in another. But I just wanted to start with a few keywords and a few things that can give us pointers later on when we look at the charts. We said integrity and continuity, but also a sense of being a separate individuality. I know that sounds a bit abstract, but it needs definition, and that needs definition over time. What's really important about the sun is that it requires exemplars or role models. They can be positive or negative ones, especially when we are still in the first years of growing up. There is this need for someone out there. I mean, it could be the so-called father figure, which is normally what people connect the sun with, but it doesn't need to be your biological father. It could be a woman as well, or anything else, or anybody else that can play the role of something that we can point to and think about in our own heads as something we either would like to follow as an example or wouldn't want to follow as an example. So anything that we can see in the world around us that gradually over time builds in our minds a sense of allegiance, a sense of direction. And the sun sign, the sign in which the sun happens to be in our chart, even though that's only part of the whole picture, is giving a very direct indication, especially when we start with the element of the sun, but then also the sign itself, of what we will be naturally attracted to as a guiding principle. We can be a bit prejudiced as well, because these sort of things, the archetypes related to the sun sign, are intrinsically something that an energy, an unexplainable thing in us is striving to resemble or to express itself in one way or another in the context of the whole chart. So it does really hurt and create a problem for us if there is a problem expressing the sun. There is usually a lack of spontaneity, Now here we can see the connection with the 5th house and the sign Leo, which are ruled by the sun in astrology. And this idea of emanating a certain energy, certain kind of easiness of being, which is not burdened by a complex of inferiority or of simply being lost in space without really knowing what you are connected to and where you're going. So the sun is so much about a sense of direction. And there are many, many things we can add here. The gravitational pull of the sun is holding the other planets around it and the whole system together. Something similar is going on in the chart as well. If our sun is not working properly, and we can explore that through the aspects and through position in house and everything else we can look at, including the Sabian symbol. I'm really a lot into Sabian symbols, and in a minute I'm going to show you in Lynn's chart how I think the Sabian symbol, Lynn, that you have for your sun has a lot to do with where it's positioned in the houses and in the charts in general. But yeah, we'll take a look at that in a minute. Yeah, so basically, various sorts of complexes and blockages could be explained back to the sun not functioning properly and not holding us, not having this natural gravitational pull, which is so needed in order to have a sense that we are sitting on a stable base. And that requires work. That's probably the thing in the chart that requires the most conscious connection with. So a lot we can learn from that, and a lot we can apply very directly and very practically in our everyday lives. So we all kind of start with that. I don't know whether you did when you first started learning astrology and knowing anything about it. That's the most popular part of it. And when we tend to then go deeper, we start putting it more in the background, because I keep saying to people, it's so much more than your sun sign. You are not totally determined by your sun sign. Of course, everyone that's a beginner needs to know that in order to understand all the other forces that are acting in the background. But ultimately, we need to come back to the sun and realize that it's the so-called president of the chart, or the ruler of the whole thing, that is in a way telling everybody else and everything else in the chart what to do and where to go, or at least if it is working properly, because as I said, it's not a given. And we need to work with the moon together, as the moon determines so much about how we are going to reflect the light of the sun and be able to integrate it. Because sometimes if the aspect between the sun and the moon, or in general their relationship, is not an easy one, we might take a very long time getting to the essence of what our sun sign is trying to tell us. And I tend to look at the whole chart as a prescription, as a recipe. It's not necessarily the case that you are supposed to be acting in a way that's very much in lockstep with what your sun sign generally is supposed to be exhibiting. But if you are, and when you work with someone, if you are a consulting astrologer as well, and or if you're just talking about the chart of a friend, if you don't see any particular signs of this sun sign being exhibited in their life, then I think this is a indication that there is something there that's not really working properly, and they might need to be guided towards understanding more about their sun sign. Right. Sometimes the disconnect with the sun leads to this very popular topic now of narcissism. And I'm not going to be able to define exactly what that means, but let's just say that narcissistic behavior is very often connected in astrology to a solar problem. There is some sort of problem with the sun, in a sense that the person hasn't developed this healthy feeling of being able to sit on an idea, or kind of have an individual standing on something, even when we're not stimulated by our relationships, and we are not constantly being given encouragement or reflection from another person that what we are doing or where we are going is the right path. So this self-sustainment is sometimes not there. And that might be one of the reasons why we sometimes get into the trap of narcissistic behavior that needs to be constantly stimulated back from the feedback of others. And when we don't get the right feedback, we may need to manipulate the situation in order to get there. That's a lot to do with the archetype of Leo and what we might go through in the 5th house. As you know, how sensitive this energy is to the ability or the inability to self-express in a very genuine and direct way, which is always down to also taking a big risk. Being yourself is a big risk. A well-functioning sun can be a great thing for the person that has it, but it could also be a threat for someone else or people around that person, because it tends to create this reaction of fear or envy, even sometimes, or the other way around. I've always been amazed how one of the greatest indications of what your purpose and vocation, some other keywords for the sun in astrology, could be, and finding threads and clues about it, is by watching yourself and seeing in what situations you might be feeling envious, because we all do every now and then, and it could be totally like without any bad intention, but think about which situations you felt like you were triggered in that way, and these situations might show you examples of the kind of work or the kind of activity that the person you were envying is doing, which might be your business to do as well. And this is a way of the sun giving some sort of a clue and like a wake-up call about what might be the case in our particular situation. So yeah, direction, vocation, choosing what kind of work or something to dedicate yourself to, even if this is not your money-making work. But the sun is really the greatest pointer in that direction. Is there anything else you would like to mention here, which is a topic around the sun? Because there are so many different things that the point today is not to go through everything I can think of about the sun. It's really a very brief overview to give us the context of the chart. But I'm interested to see and hear what is your association and how you have been looking into the sun in your charts so far. From what perspective? If anyone wants to comment. Or are you more curious to look at the chart examples and just get into it?
I think you bring up a really good question I hadn't thought of before. And personally, in all of my years of looking at astrology, I never think of my own sun in isolation from anything else. It's all in relation to all the other planets, and so it's an interesting question that I've never even thought of the answer to. It's so, I don't know, like it's so who you embedded into everything else, right? I mean, I guess when you're integrated, that's what it's meant to be. But wow, it's kind of early for some heavy thoughts. I'm going to have some fun with this.
Yes, I must remind myself that most of you are in a place where it's still early morning, and maybe we need to get warmed up a bit more. But Nancy, I'm so happy that you mentioned this connection of the sun with everything else in the chart. That's something I've been repeating again and again, that I hate when we need to separate just one factor and talk about it in isolation without context, as people are usually so prone to do when you go into, Facebook groups and all sorts of places where there is a forum to discuss astrology. That it's so unfortunate that things are so complicated that we cannot just give a recipe and say this is what you need to do with that thing in your chart. Just go ahead and everything's going to work out as magic. But yeah, you're right. It's ultimately how the sun and whatever else we decide to look at connects with everybody else in the chart. But today I wanted to really focus on the sun, because if we need to take one factor, maybe we can claim that the sun has a bit more importance than everything else, just because if you think about it, all the others are planets that are part of a system, the center of which is the sun. So we can imagine maybe that inside of us, we also have a similar center operating. And because of those so many other factors, and the fact that it's not just the chart and what we are innately born to feel as our own energies, but also there is the environment, there are the things around us that are trying to influence us, we want it or not. The whole picture gets a bit blurred, and it's not very easy normally to connect with that center, that without being pushed in that direction through maybe transits and progressions that are coming in a particular stage of our life and are putting an emphasis on the sun, so that even if we don't want to work on it, we are meant to, as depression comes, some sort of discontent with a particular state of affairs in our life, or something happens which is so shocking and so triggering that we cannot ignore that we are not following our center and we need to correct something there. But yeah, it's a process. It's a growing up process to build a strong sun. This is what I believe. It's also a process of separation from the lunar topics, of not always wanting to hide behind family, protection from our circle or from social stuff, but building a sense of self-sufficiency without that meaning that we are totally separate. The sun really helps, if it works, to find the balance between being distinct and participating. So it can give us information when we look at it in the chart, both about how to be standing on our own 2 feet without being too dependent. So it kind of helps overcome dependency issues, lunar issues, but at the same time, how to not isolate from the environment and from society, but find a meaningful purpose, which is integrating our sun in the bigger scheme of things and giving it a direction that then creates a sense of meaning. Because usually the solar crises are crises of meaning. Every now and then, I'm sure we all lose track of why are we doing what we're doing, why we are even alive. It's very much a life and death question sometimes with the sun, because this is our main source of energy and of fuel, as many astrologers say, like you are a machine or a car or something that needs this particular kind of fuel, which is your solar disposition in the chart. And if it's not feeding that, then we get depleted, we get disinterested in life, and we can very easily start like a motion downhill from there, because this integrating principle is simply not working. And it requires genuine things, actually. It's not easy just to find a hook, find something that would replace, as many people try to do, because I feel like we are all instinctively going in the direction of our suns, even without knowing it. We feel a hunger to do that, a need to do that. It's not always easy to orient yourself, whether you're doing it properly, whether it's really working. That's one of the things astrology could be so helpful with. And I hope today when we look at the charts, we can we can see how we can extract information which is really practical and really can bring us back together when we have lost our way. I don't know, Lynn, if you have lost your way. You don't sound like it at the moment, but maybe you can tell us a story about the past when during your lifetime you might have had a moment when you really needed to reconnect.
Yeah, there have been many moments. And as you're speaking, and Nancy, I agree with you, this is something really to think about in a way. I've never thought about it quite this way before. But I wrote a course several years ago because I was thinking about this type of thing as, if your ascendant, your moon, and your sun all get along, life is very different than if they don't.
Right.
So when, like, for example, if your ascendant is Sagittarius and you go to a party and you meet all these people and you're real outgoing, but behind that, you're a Cancer sun with a Pisces moon, are you really that Sagittarius that they met? How does your chart work? Because those are disparate connections. They're really not compatible with each other. I mean, that you make them work, but they don't support each other in the way in which, I'm not saying this egotistically, but this is one of the things I've always looked at with my chart, is that my sun, my moon, and my ascendant all like each other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that life easier.
Well, that's a very good point. On the one hand, when we compare charts, we can easily see that some of them are obviously harder than others. That in some charts, there are obviously different factors which are pulling in different directions, and they're potentially making it more difficult for the person to integrate it all. But I really strongly believe that we all have the chart that we are supposed to have because some other reason, some sort of history. Maybe we can look for clues about that in the nodal axis or elsewhere, depending on which techniques you're using. But it seems like it makes sense, at least to me, that there is a history. So now we're born with this chart. A little bit easier or a little bit more difficult depending on what came before, and maybe also depending on where we are meant to go next with it. So it's probably some sort of spiral direction of working lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and we happen to find ourselves now in this particular part of the whole cycle. So it's interesting to try to look at that as a continuous story, and in the sense of that, the sun might also be something that could help us make the connection between the past and the future. Now, it's connected to the nodes, which are the thing that connects the past with the future, and with the moon. So moon, sun, as you said, ascendant. Some people can use also the part of fortune to see how the sun, the moon, and the ascendant in a chart, these three things, the so-called big three, have another point they create, which is like, in my mind, an alternative moon. So if you move the sun to the ascendant, to symbolically say, what would I be and how would I feel, let's say, emotionally mostly, if my solar individuality, my true purpose, my real direction that is meant to kind of determine my plan, scheme, and decision-making process for the long term, what if it's exactly aligned with my instinctual self-expression when I meet the world just like this, which is what the ascendant does. So we are making this imaginary exercise. We put the sun on the ascendant to see what would it be, and then the moon follows it, almost like it's hooked to the sun exactly in the way, in the angle that they happen to be at birth. And when we move the sun, the moon moves as well, and she sits now in the point of the part of fortune. I don't know if you've ever used that thing, so I just try to very quickly explain it. But basically, that now becomes a new kind of position of the moon, a new kind of reflecting on reality, which, if we take a look at the chart and see where the part of fortune is, this might give us an idea what we can do to help the sun, moon, ascendant balance work a little bit better and in our own advantage. So you just reminded me of that when you mentioned the three factors together. Okay. Let's go to the chart. Yeah, Stephen, you wanted to say something.
yes, following what was said earlier relating to the direction of one's life, because there's a lot of people who don't know anything about their natal at all.
I'm cleaning the fridge.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Steve.
But people always know what they were born, even in the month. So they say, oh, okay, let's say, okay, oh, yeah, I was born in the summer, I'm a Leo. But they don't know anything about their natal chart. But what they're working on is the tropical position of the sun as the direction of their life.
Yeah, in the zodiac.
Yes, and let's say in earlier times, when people wouldn't even keep track of, they say, "Oh, I was born in the spring," or "No, I was born in the winter." So they would have it would be a tropical orientation. However, I guess comparing contrast, the sidereal system would say, "Oh, no, you're completely wrong because the constellations, it's really your sun is Virgo and not Leo at all." Well, but we live in a tropical world.
Well, that's why we mentioned about the house systems in the beginning, that eventually, and this is the question that I wanted to really stress on with the chart, the position of the sun by house. So the position of the sun by house in the chart, well, of course, depending on which system you chose to use, I think is giving us even more information about how to use the sun and where we need to apply the sun.
And I agree with you very much. So this is what I like about the solar fire, because if someone doesn't even know their birthday, but they know what their birthday was or their time, I say, well, you know what? I'll put the sun on the first house, because this is where the person will intrinsically identifies, and then just take that as the position, at least, because it says I can't do rectification or the person, all that complication. But he said, but if I put the sun on the first house for an unknown sign, then I can take those general themes and apply them across the houses within a tropical system of daily experience on the planet Earth under the sun.
Right. Well, I think maybe for different people depends on where the sun is in the chart. I'm a little biased here because my sun is in the 6th house, and this makes it very vocation oriented. So what you choose to do in your life as your main activity is probably a bit more important for me than it would be for someone that has the sun in the 12th house or in the 2nd house or something like that. I do realize that, but still I think there is a common theme going on here about the position of the sun in a house, that it can give us a lot of pointers about which things in life are my business to get involved in order for me to gradually get into this sense of continuity and participation in a meaningful way in the world in which I live. So as a separate person, but part of something. So where the whole meets the part and the other way around. And even if I can give someone only a little bit of information about their chart, and they are a young person, for example, or someone that later in life has discovered that everything that they have been doing so far is more blocking them more than giving them the leonine sense of freedom and creativity kind of expression, then this is probably because the sun is not applied in the right place, and it has started to be applied in the wrong place because the person listened to advice of someone external or tried to follow whatever else external wasn't suitable for their particular birth situation. I also don't do rectification. It's such a pity if you don't know the sun position in a house for someone, I think, because that limits you a lot in your ability to help them focus themselves. But also I realize that not every chart is so focused. Again, I have a very focused chart myself with many things in the same place, while other people might have a very spread out chart. But still, the sun is a guiding principle. It is a light, a beacon that needs to give orders in one way or another to the other planets, that they are, of course, responsible for the different subsidiary functions in us, and they all need to play their part accordingly. But they are all supposed to be going in the direction of the sun. Ideally, we're talking about a perfect situation, which is never perfect in real life. But I strongly believe that if we take the time to focus on the sun, sometime along the our travels through exploring the chart and working with astrology, then a lot can be achieved, and a lot of meaningful progress, which can later on, if we believe in that, if we decide to give it a chance, will give us a sense of stability that nothing else in the chart can, because it could be that we are overcompensating with another function, trying to swipe under the carpet the fact that we haven't really applied the sun properly in its right place. So anyway, enough philosophizing. I think we should go now to Lynn's chart finally to see how it works. And I admit I don't know how it works for you, Lynn, but I wanted to start with just a few quick impressions from me about the chart, and then I'll leave you to tell us about it.
Okay.
I know that you are into astrology yourself. You're not like a total beginner or anything like that. So I'm sure you would tell us maybe a lot more, because you know best how things have been playing out in your life. Okay, so you are a Scorpio sun in the 6th degree, so 5 degrees, 36 minutes. And the very first thing I do when I look at a chart, and actually the sun is one of the first things I look at, is what is really the position of that sun overall. We can see in your case that it's exactly conjunct the south node. So it's in a very, very close relationship with the nodal axis. That immediately, I think, spotlights your sun and tells us, take a closer look, see even more what is going on with that sun, because it will definitely be a major factor, not just in general terms, but a bit more than usual even. It is extremely connected to your past, whatever that past is. And my first association is that possibly you're carrying over from the past a certain individuality or self, which may be like a continuation of, say, you have been doing something before, you have been involved in things before, which haven't quite finished, but they have been in a relatively smooth way transferred again into this lifetime and continued as a team. Maybe there was some sort of unfinished business which needed to be worked on again, or you simply have a lot to contribute from the past to the present. And there is, I mean, this conjunction with the south node, not with the north node. So the north node is on the other side, it's in opposition to the sun. So this is a bit of a contradiction, because obviously this time around you're supposed to include, look at, see something that you hadn't been maybe working with so much before. South node and sun in Scorpio. Now in this system, it's between the 4th and the 5th house, but when I have something like this, I always assume they are going to the 5th house. I mean, even if they're still right on the cusp, and we can have like this, we have started the journey from the 4th, and now going towards the 5th. So it's like a continuation in team. Still, the 5th house is a bit more important, because that's the new place where the sun is really wanting to be now. The south node has been there. This is what needs to be noted, because the south node is retrograde, like the nodes are retrograde. And it's not like it's been in the 4th going towards the 5th, but it's the other way around. So
I interrupt in that.
Yeah.
If you use the true node, it is stationary direct.
Oh, okay. That's interesting as well. Do you use the true one more than the mean one?
True node, yes.
Okay, I don't know yet. I haven't really decided for myself which one works better. But okay, yeah, I think you have a point. So this one is the one that can be retrograde or not.
Right.
While the other one, I think, is more, I mean, whatever you see it.
The true node does go retrograde most of the time as well, but it does station, it does go direct periodically. Whereas the mean node, I think, is just about always retrograde. But
yeah, I think you're right.
I wanted to interrupt you in that, because it makes such a big difference in how you see the node, if it's retrograde or direct.
Do
So
you think so? I was having that theory myself. I shared it with the group some time ago. I was really convinced some time ago without having that much of a like big pool of charts that I've looked at, but it caught my attention that when the nodes are not retrograde in the chart, they sometimes work the other way around. So in a way, we can even think that the boundary is very blurred between the teams of the south node and the teams of the north node, and we cannot be so categorical where you're coming from and where you're going towards, because in that particular moment they're not in that direction. So it's like the direction is more important than to determine which one is the south and which one is the north, if you see what I mean.
I
Then
don't, but that's okay.
no,
No,
I mean that it's a possibility. I mean, this is just a hypothesis, but what I'm trying to say is that maybe the north node is in Scorpio and the south in
no,
Taurus, if they are not retrograde.
no.
You
They're
are connecting with the other way around.
still in the same signs. It's just the direction they're moving or if they've stopped.
Right. Okay. Well,
Because they're still in the same place that they are. It's just the motion.
I
Yeah.
see. I see. But you know, the nodes, because they are points in space,
Mhm.
and when we determine which one is the north and which one is the south, it's like the point where the moon moving in its axis around the earth, when she's crossing north, the ecliptic, and when she's crossing south, the ecliptic. So
Okay.
basically, that crossing south and crossing north is what determines which one is the north node, which one is the south node. But anyway, let's not get too much into this one, because this is just a guess at the moment. Sticking to the what the chart is telling us, that your south node is with the sun. And I use a lot the Sabian symbols. I don't know if you do, especially when I don't know you and I have no background information. This being very close to the cusp between the fourth and the fifth house. And we'll take a look at the aspects in a minute as well. But the fact that the sun is so close to the cusp, I think, has something to do with the Sabian symbol. I mean, this is just my opinion, but the Sabian symbol of 5 degrees Scorpio or 6 degree of Scorpio, do you know what it is? Have you checked it
No,
yourself?
I don't.
Okay, I wanted to show you all. And that would be a question for you, Lynn, to tell us if you connect something in your life with this story, with this symbol, considering where the sun is as well, and the fact that the sun is with what we connect with the so-called past. So let me just see, I wanted to share with you another screen. Okay, this is 6 degree of Scorpio. A gold rush tears men away from their native soil. So the phrase gold rush is somehow, I have an association immediately with the fifth house, where, gold, looking for, some sort of ambition maybe is involved here in the symbol, striving for something. Then tears men away from their native soil. So the native soil I associate with the fourth house, almost like there is some sort of reason for that sun to be moving away from the fourth house and now making a transition to the fifth house. Is there a theme in your life which could be connected with having to move away from roots, from soil, from familiar territory, or for something that, tell us about it if you want.
Well, at my first Saturn return, I was married and my husband was originally from Switzerland, and I achieved automatic citizenship in Switzerland because I married a Swiss citizen. And female, that's an automatic thing. Didn't work in the reverse. And after a period of time, we decided to move to Switzerland. So that definitely, and that was at my first Saturn return. And then eventually moved back here to Chicago.
Right.
And I
So,
did have a very
yeah,
strong need to leave my home territory.
I missed you here. You said you felt a very strong what to leave the home
Strong
territory?
need, a
Need.
very strong need to move away from here.
Okay. So do you think that part of the motivation to move there was not simply your relationship at the time, but there was something more to it?
Yeah, oh, much more. It had nothing to do with my relationship, actually.
Right.
But it had to do with my need to find a new place to start over, to get away from all the things that were happening here at the time, which were not personal to me, but more of a societal overview that wasn't working for me at the time. And so moved to Switzerland and only stayed there for like 4 years, and then moved back and had a very different perspective of coming back to my native country and my native home. I saw everything very differently, but I needed to go away in order to do that.
Interesting. Well, that really ties in very closely with what the
It does
explanation
very
is
much
here
so.
as well. I think we always, has been my observation that when I read the Sabian symbol of the sun, particularly of the sun, and very often of the South Node as well, to someone that hasn't had a clue before that, usually the reaction is, I know what this is about. I don't know what this is about, but the person always knows how this particular symbolic picture translates into their reality, into what has been going on. So, well, when you went abroad at the time, were you in search of something in particular? Do you have something on your mind? Or you were just
wanted to get away from all the things that were happening in the United States overall. And, I was also becoming quite discontent in my marriage.
Okay.
And I hoped that moving to a place where I didn't speak the language or know the culture, that my husband would have to step up and be the adult. That did not work out, but nonetheless, that was part of my motivation. So I had at least 2 reasons to want to move.
And has there been some sort of disillusionment? I understand you eventually went back, but here this symbol is alluding to after the gold rush, so-called, after the striving to open up your possibilities in something new or somewhere new, then eventually you discover that it was a mirage. There were some, or parts of it were a mirage. Is that what happened?
Yes. Yes.
Why?
Not so much a mirage as that what I had hoped, and I'm really good at lying to myself and believing it, even though I know I'm lying to myself, which I attribute to my Mercury Neptune connection. It's I realized a lot of things, and I also realized, and I knew this beforehand, that you take yourself with you wherever you go. So you're always still going to be facing the same crap you thought you would walk away from. But yeah, I needed to get away from everything here in order to really start to see parts of myself that I wouldn't have been able to see as easily if I'd remained in my group of people I'd grown up with and all that kind of stuff, and having to go into, as my astrologer at the time put it, you need to go out into the cold in order to come back into the warm.
Interesting.
That made sense to me at the time that she said that, but yeah.
Well, I think also the fact that the sun is so involved with the nodes is why whatever this is telling us about your life has played out so vividly. Because I think when there is a planet around the nodes, especially the sun, what the themes of that planet, where it's sitting in houses, the Sabian symbol, maybe also we can say, is makes things more eventful. It really is part of what's going on, and we can register it. And that accounts to moments of transition, moments of so-called fateful revelation about something, or making a more serious step in your life. Well, in other charts, when the sun is more isolated, it might take very much more deliberate effort to connect with it, and you have to almost like pull it out from the depths and make it work, rather than it stepping in immediately. It seems to me like your sun stepped in, and even if it wasn't really clear where it wants to lead you, there was this sense of you need to follow something. You need to.
Yes.
Right. Okay, well, you mentioned also you were running away from something. So there was this juxtaposition
I
of
don't know if I would call it running away
distancing.
exactly, but needing to get away from not a specific situation, but a general malaise that was going on at the time.
Right. So could it be connected, this particular part of it, with the aspects that the sun is making? Now, you are one of those cases where I don't see any so-called stressful things going on. You've got a sextile with Saturn and a trine with Uranus, right?
Yes.
Maybe if you use wider orbs, there might be something else going on as well, which I haven't.
There isn't. I've always been amazed that my son doesn't have any difficult aspects.
Yes, yes. Well, I don't know how to interpret that. We can have different interpretations, but my first thought will be that this sun is meant to be left alone in one way or another, not particularly stressed out. Maybe it knows itself, or you know yourself more naturally, more quickly. There is a certain stability about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's if you notice, all my planets are below the horizon except for Uranus. So
Yeah.
I am very much an introvert, although I am open about who and what I am. I know that's not supposed to be normal for a Scorpio, but it is for me. And I pretty much, and according to my parents, came into this life knowing exactly who I was and being myself immediately. And they were like, oh, yeah, okay,
Yes.
this kid doesn't need us to tell her, we'll just help her. So
that's such a good confirmation.
I knew exactly who I was. And yeah.
That's a very good confirmation that we can, I mean, suppose that when the sun is like this, with those aspects, then it's not meant to be discovered so much as applied. Maybe we can say once again, as it's, yeah, I don't know. I get the impression that it's a sun which is not here for the first time.
Yeah.
It's like continuing to do something that is already been doing.
Right.
But always when the sun,
yeah,
you
I
too?
do. Yeah.
Okay. But then if we go back to the South Node situation, I was curious to see, because they are like, what is it, less than 1 degree difference between the position of the node and the position of the sun. But I was still curious, what's the Sabian symbol of the node? And this can give us as an idea of the so-called past or something else, maybe, which we can imagine about the whole picture. As always, when the South Node is in Scorpio, I expect that there is a memory of some sort of more intense and more dramatic situation. And in this lifetime, things need to calm down. Things need to be stabilized. Maybe that's why you're born with so many stabilizing things, good Saturn and Uranus support to the sun.
I'm not sure I would consider you the Uranus a stabilizer. I've taken a lot of criticism in life because of that Uranus, which I've only in the last 10 years begun to understand, because people would always say, you're just so weird. And and other people would say, oh, you don't really care what other people think of you, do you? And I'd have to say, no, I really don't, which they took as a negative thing. But I've always attributed that to the Uranus connection of, whatever,
Not only, also the sun connection, because on the one hand, they are connected. But if the sun is really stable, as we think it is,
I think it is, yes.
Then that very often gets that reaction, to be honest, because most people struggle with the sun, if we have to be honest. Yeah, this is where most of the complexes come from, because other functions that try to compensate, or when there isn't a stable feeling of self, then we tend to react in that way to people that exude the opposite. And
I'm just thinking that many years ago, one of my teachers said, you grow into your sun. And I always wondered about that, because I never felt like I grew into my sun. I always felt like I was already there. I came in with an understanding of the sun.
Well, there are exceptions, but this doesn't still mean that you don't have any work to do on the sun. Because
I'm thinking, if it is true, then it is probably true for most people that they do have to learn to grow into their sun. Yeah.
Yeah, well, obviously, this is a new life now. This is a new lifetime. having the sun as a center. So you, like everybody else, I believe, have to figure out how to integrate that sun now in this chart, because maybe the sun itself as a principle is something intrinsically well positioned in you, but then you used to have a different chart before, totally different circumstances. So now what some people say the South Node is about, when it's not negative necessarily, you know, things that we need to unlearn or balance because it's been too much or so on, it could be a point of release of seed, a point of release of creative talent, or something that we can give to others, something we can contribute to something, almost like you're coming with a full bag and now you have something to give. The problem with that sun might be if it's not giving enough, if it hasn't found enough channels in this lifetime to give itself out, to shine really as a sun, because that's what happens when the sun functions well. It gives out from itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not that it's necessarily something wrong with it, but that it's fine, but it needs to apply itself more actively. Maybe that's what it's all about here.
Yes.
And that's why you've got the support from Saturn, the support from Uranus, so you can potentially integrate it in the environment in a way and make a practical difference. Maybe that's why the North Node is in the 10th house, or we can say 11th house in Taurus. Like make a positive, physical, tangible difference in the community, you know, starting from the standpoint of the stable personality. Like, isn't that the goal for everyone at the end of the day? So we work on the sun so that eventually when we stabilize it, we can consciously contribute something meaningful and in the right place to the bigger picture. So I guess you are at that point when now it's time to start giving to the bigger picture. Is it? Are you doing that?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I do think I try to give to the bigger picture.
Do you have opportunity to participate in things which are beyond your personal world?
Oh, yeah.
What are they? Are they something like political or social causes?
Yeah, well, yes, all of the above. I'm pretty diversified. But part of how I feel I give back to the community is doing readings. And and I'm also an Akashic record reader, which is pretty deep and helps a lot of people when they come for a reading. So in that way, I really feel that I'm doing some work for the community as well.
That makes sense. Going back to your Uranus, I think you said it earlier about the Uranus. I don't know if you're familiar with the out of bounds planets idea, but yeah, I thought it's interesting that your Uranus is out of bounds and the only one out of bounds. I know that
only one above the horizon.
And the only one above the horizon. Yeah, that makes it a singleton in one way or another. And even though not exactly, but yeah, it is a singleton in the sense that it's the only one over the horizon. So yeah, it makes sense. So what else can we say about the sun? Well, I think it's always important to see what's the connection sun-moon. So what's the phase of the moon or the solar-lunar relationship that you're born under? And in your case, the moon is coming back to the sun in a way. So it's late time in the cycle of the sun and the moon. You were born under a new moon in, so not under, because it wasn't really a new moon, but what I mean is that the last new moon before you were born, so you were born during that month, is 9 degrees Libra. So not Scorpio. It wasn't a Scorpio month you were born on, during, but a Libra month, which I think is quite important. It makes that transition almost like a bridge between the planets in Libra and the planets in Scorpio. They are a team in a way, because this cycle of the sun and the moon, it started in Libra. Now the moon is coming back and kind of completing it. So she's been on a mission to promote the ideas of the sun and is now learned quite a lot. And we can find it in your birth chart in a moment when it's almost about to go back and start a new cycle. Not really very close to the balsamic phase of the moon.
Yeah.
Have you thought about that? And
I have actually, and I do feel I'm sort of finishing a lot of things up in this lifetime. Yeah.
It's also supposed to make you a bit more mature, a bit more wise if it's working well. And we can see that the moon and the sun are not in a stressful relationship as an aspect. They are in two signs which are considered to be compatible. And going back to Saturn and the support of Saturn to the sun, I think it kind of makes sense that maybe you are a mature personality, not just because of this particular lifetime, but even from before. And it's so much a question of leaving a legacy or having something to contribute from the standpoint of what you've already built.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Anyone else wants to make a comment about the chart or ask a question? What do you guys think about it? Anyone?
It won't hurt my feelings. It's okay.
So you give permission for
Oh,
us
yeah.
to go wherever we want.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, while you're thinking about a question or a comment, let's take a look at the Sabian symbol for the South Node, shall we? Are you curious about that?
I am.
Okay, so that one, just give me a second. As I went to some other. Okay, so this is now Scorpio 5, the previous degree. A massive rocky shore resists the pounding of the sea. This is reminding me of what you shared about having to, or not having, but deciding to move away from an environment which felt in some way not very good for you. What about the topic of resisting, like Saturnian maybe resisting, being kind of having to put up with things that don't match up with what you would like it to be, with your vision. Another very big, very important keyword for the sun is vision. Where do we envisage ourselves being, and where would we imagine, almost like a dream, which sometimes can be a dream we don't really believe in very much, but it's still there, it's still in the background of our mind. So this is the South Node degree. Do you think that you might be coming from a situation where for a long time you've been enduring environment which you weren't very comfortable in?
In past lives, definitely. I've done a lot of past life stuff. So yes, I would say that's absolutely true.
So what did it reveal? Did it reveal some sort of Saturnian struggle there?
No, I wouldn't say it's a Saturnian struggle, and I'm still processing what this Sabian symbol says. I would say much of this is very appropriate, but I would say that the first sentence is not true. Implies a relentless resistance to change. I'm really good with change.
Oh, but we have to remember this is the South Node. So when I look at the Sabian symbol for the South Node, I look at the last sentence here, which is like what she calls the caution, how this could go wrong in a way, or more the negative side of it, because we're always looking for themes to overcome with the South Node. Like maybe this symbol can more give us a clue of what needed to be changed and what could have gone wrong. So the last one, let's take a look. You tell us whether that makes any sense to you, but acting out of stubbornness, which can lead to inertia, not growth. So is it not more than, not that you don't want change, but that there are particular ways you want to do things, I don't know, or tenaciousness, or I don't know, being very adamant that this is the way and not being open to.
I would say that's true, but I don't know that I wouldn't call it stubbornness. I would call it the need to be who and what I am at the time and to do things that are working for me. So that's why I will make the change, which is not out of stubbornness. And I do say I'm a victim of inertia in that if I'm working really hard, I'll just continue working really hard until I'm forced to stop. And then if I get lazy, I'm going to be lazy until something forces me to get back to work. So that's the only way in which I figure that I'm a victim of inertia. I don't think I have stubbornness. I will dig in, but I take stubbornness as, well, I'm just going to do it this way because I'm going to do it this way. And maybe I don't want you to be right. And that I don't do.
Yeah, well, this symbol also talks about strength and resilience and determination. So it might be not that you have fought against something, but rather determination to do things for your own development. Mm-hmm. So you go heads forth, especially if the sun is in the 5th house, and kind of willing to go ahead and take a chance and take a risk, so that you can be and go and achieve what you want. Like if we are right in thinking that you have a very strong sun, then we expect from that sun to be very determined, kind of going in the direction in which it thinks it needs to go. What if the whole story of the past and this sun together with the past was a situation of being too headstrong about following your direction and just receiving opposition from life itself, like from what the conditions and the circumstances naturally cannot always be very helpful for us. Like it says here, fighting the elements. What if you were doing all the right things, but simply overdoing it a little bit, wanting to overcome, like the rocky shore was resisting the sea. The sea is the natural force, the one that cannot be stopped. As much as the rock is solid and stable and determined, it's still, the sea is on it. It's going to press on it. So is that just Taurus now, the North Node in Taurus? Is it trying to teach appreciation for the natural forces and the need to take them into account as well when you're following your goals?
I have to give that some thought. I'm not trying to be difficult, but this does not resonate with me.
Okay, well, it just sounded like, also looking at the moon in Virgo, I'm curious about whether you have been stopped on your tracks when you have tried to do things. Have you ever been stopped by the so-called natural environment, which could be your own health, for example, or no? You've always had like a clear way?
Pretty much. It hasn't been easy. I mean, I've had a lot of different careers. I've made a huge number of changes in my life. And no, I haven't been stopped in doing any of that. Where I stop is when I reach a point where I say, okay, I'm done with this. Now I'm going on to something else. So no, I have not felt in any way throughout my life and all the changes that outside forces have been stopping me from going forward. If anything, they haven't affected me at all. When I've gone forward in something that I really want to master, I've always mastered it.
Okay, what about relationships though? Because if the sun is in the 5th house, I don't know how long, whether you would say that your relationship that brought years ago, whether that was more a 5th house relationship or a 7th house relationship or some other type. But how do you see this determination of the solar individuality? Something that many people connect more with masculine energy than feminine. And you are a woman, you're obviously a very strong woman. And how has this impacted, the shining of your sun, that obviously is quite good. How has this impacted on your ability to relate with others? Especially
I've had, a fair number of relationships. I was married for a pretty long time to a fellow Scorpio, I should mention.
You're like me. Okay.
that in actuality, his weakness and I was in therapy with him for 2 years, so I'm not saying this is just my opinion. He admitted to it. He did everything he could to undermine me. So maybe those are the outside forces, but I still went forward and still did what I needed to do, regardless of the fact that he was doing things to keep me from being successful. Fortunately, I will say he's a decent human being, and we really talked through all of this. So he also told me that why he did all the things that he did was that he was always afraid that I would leave him. I'm like, well, guess what? And that I was so strong and independent that he always was worried about me not staying with him. And then I was in a few other relationships. I did realize that there were men who presented themselves to me as strong and supportive, but when I needed them to actually support me emotionally or something, they were incapable of doing it. That really all they wanted to do was lean on my strength.
Yes. Well, that's
I had
supposed to be, one of the drawbacks of having a very
Yeah.
strong sun, that it doesn't really give it the chance to if you are choosing to live your life as a male-female relationship, for example, then the man really cannot play the solar role, because it takes a special man to overcome, kind of to not be overwhelmed by the strength of your own sun. So it's either a relationship where willingly the woman takes the solar role and the man takes the lunar role, which is totally fine as well. But I'm a little bit biased myself about this. This is totally a personal impression. Think that it's very difficult for most men to, therefore, to the relationship to work for both people when the man is not able to somehow be followed as a solar energy by the woman he's with. That there is a certain kind of, you can be a very strong personality yourself, you can be following your own path, and I very much like to say to people, your sun is your own business. This is not a relationship planet. This is your planet that you are supposed, kind of responsible.
That's really great. This is not a relationship planet. You're following your. That's wonderful.
Yeah, but still, it is mingled in the relationship as well, because even if the woman, I think, is following a completely different path from the man, she needs to, I think, somehow naturally respect, because she feels a natural attraction, connection somehow. It's a value judgment to whatever the man is as a solar identity himself, even if that solar identity is very different from hers. And when the man doesn't feel in a solar way supported by his partner, that I believe is a very big problem. And sooner or later, things, separate due to other reasons. But one of the main things for long-term friendships, relationships, or colleague relationships, or whatever, but mostly in couples I've seen is when the woman admires in one way or another the son of the man. Of course, if we see the man developing that properly, because it might be something that she's inclined to support, but he's failing to do it properly.
I did admire their solar capacities when I first was involved with them, and I do want to let you know that I did enter into a really perfect relationship with a very strong partner who had no issues with supporting me in anything that I was doing, and vice versa. So I just want to say all was happy. So
it's great, isn't it, when the man has a good sun, so-called, because this I have found is one of the greatest ways of supporting a woman, whoever that woman is, stronger or weaker in that particular moment, because he simply doesn't feel intimidated. Each one of us, whoever we are not really intimidated by a lot of things in life or other people, if we have the capacity to connect with our own center, with our own sun. That gives the most reassurance, the most stability in situations. And it's then just a question of resisting hardship or doing, good or not so good in certain moments. But the core individuality is relatively stable, but it's so difficult when you have those ego struggles
Right.
with a weak sun.
Yeah.
And the weak sun is never possible to trick. I mean, the person either takes responsibility for the sun somehow in their own way, maybe late in life, even triggered by a transit or triggered by a progression or something else, takes on the responsibility to resolve the matter related to the sun, or there is a problem after problem after problem. I don't know. This is just what I've seen. Do you agree?
Yes.
Do you think that's the case? Yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe this is just a scorpionic view of being brutal about it, so like we are tending to be.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
Lynn, anything else you would like to share about that and
I
about the
just,
sun?
just one thing that I think, well, actually, there's two things that I think are kind of important too, particularly with my son, is that it is in mutual reception with Pluto.
Oh, that's interesting too. Yeah, yeah, I hadn't noticed that as well. You are from that generation of Pluto in Leo, but then being born with Sun in Scorpio. That's, yeah, when the sun is involved. Well, in this particular case, because we're talking about Scorpio, I'm similar, but conjunction with Pluto and Scorpio. That's definitely reinforcing the scorpionic tendencies of the sun.
And yeah, definitely. I do think that's true. Yeah.
And yeah, well, also I was thinking, this is, yeah, as you said, I mean, on the face of it, looks like a very introverted chart. So we are expecting that you're going to be minding your own business a lot more than being involved in things out there. Now at this stage of your life, do you think you're more exposed than?
No. No,
you're still not exposed enough?
Here's the thing. People don't always realize how introverted I am. One of my very close friends said, I didn't know how shy and introverted you were until I got to know you really well. And I thought, oh, that's a great observation. In Placidus, and since, you're saying, well, the sun's almost in the fifth, having the South Node and the sun in the fifth in Placidus, but it is there. And I have been a teacher of adults. I have, done all kinds of on stage type things, because as you know, when you're teaching, you're really pretty much on stage.
Exactly.
And I'm super outgoing and, really get things moving. And as soon as I walk out of that room, I'm back to quiet and reserved and introverted. And but I think it's my son can really pop up and do let's do the Leo thing when it has a role to play.
Well, also the Mars maybe plays into it.
So yeah, but otherwise, if I have to go, and with the Cancer rising does not help. Right. So
what do you think about my theory that well, first of all, we always have the ascendant that we need, but my theory is that it's either hiding something or trying to expose something. Obviously, what is your ascendant doing? Trying to hide something, or to
no, it's not trying. I don't think it's not trying to hide anything, because I'm obviously fairly open about everything, which I know is anti-Scorpio tradition. But I'm still trying to figure out why I chose to have that ascendant.
So what I mean by hiding, maybe I a little bit confused you with that word hiding. It's what I mean is that, let's say we come to the conclusion that overall the chart is pulling very much in some sort of direction.
Okay.
So, and then the ascendant is there to balance something out.
Okay.
So in the case of the so-called hiding, what I mean is, like, obviously you have a Cancer ascendant, which the way its temperament is expected to be more reserved, a bit more shy, and so on. So why do we need Cancer to be the mask?
I think I know, because it causes me to step back, watch everybody and everything, and evaluate who is safe for me to know, who is safe for me to interact with. And the Scorpio up the safety aspect.
Yeah.
I always felt that here's how my chart works for me. If someone hurts my feelings, which is easy to do, with the Cancer ascendant pops into, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And Scorpio sun says, let's go get them. They hurt your feelings. Let's go get them. And the Virgo moon says, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. You guys calm down, because all we know at this point is that we're feeling something. But we don't yet even know what we're feeling. So let's work on that before we make any decisions about what to do. Let's analyze those feelings and get in touch with what they really are. And then by that time, I recognize, no, just walk away, leave it alone.
Okay, so then the ascendant serves like a filter, like a mechanism to preserve, the calmness of the situation, so you don't jump into things which are too much too quickly.
Right.
And for that reason, I guess that's why the chart needed that ascendant.
I will also tell you, just from a lot of the past life work and stuff that I've done over the years, this incarnate, and I've had a lot of psychic readings and past life regressions, etc. And this life is supposed to be all about me, for me. I'm not supposed to be concentrating on what's going on with other people. Not that I can't interact or help them, but this incarnation is strictly for me to be with me.
Well, isn't that making sense in terms of the notes? Because the Scorpio South node has been in some kind of detrimental way too much involved with others.
Yes.
Well, I don't know, maybe you know a lot more, having done so much deep work on it.
Yeah.
But dependencies are not recommended in short. So yes, in that case, what you said about being about you, yes, the Taurus North Node is a time to take care of yourself, to take, to really focus on your own needs, desires, feelings, whatever it is, and nurture that. So that's Earth there, Earth on the moon. Also, the part of fortune, the way I calculate it, would still be in Virgo.
That's the way I calculate it too.
So it kind of is groundedness needed here, like calming down needed from maybe lifetimes before, which were a bit too intense and too tiresome to deal with.
Too much responsibility.
And too much responsibility. Yeah. You probably like that, and you're very capable of responsibility.
I really not to have responsibility, but people always, if I'm in a large group of people I don't know and they need someone to be responsible, they'll always turn to me. I'm like, why me? But I think, the Saturn, I think all the responsibilities from where I've been in other lives, I think that's why I have a nice Saturn that is saying, what, make this easy for you. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Saturn is quite nice, but it's also a bit at cross purposes with the Mars. So that's a personal planet. Saturn square Mars is a big deal as well.
It's really good, because with what I know past, for the Saturn to say to the Mars, no, not going to do that. So that has worked very well for me, even though
knows how to draw the line. Is that how it is?
Yes. Here's the line. Don't cross it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Lina, I'm deliberately going on and on because Wendy is not here, and I think
that's what
why not, as a Scorpio, once at least delve deeper into something, into a chart. And I hope this could be like a maybe a workshop kind of demonstration, how I would approach you as a client, for example, because we don't know each other at all. And I think you've been to a few of my past events, but I don't know anything about you really.
When the pandemic first started, I was coming to your groups, but there's just been so much going on.
I understand. No, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. Well, guys, anybody else wants to comment or ask a question? So it's not just between me and Lynn. You are welcome to have a word as well if you want to.
I won't take offense. You can be honest. But because I enjoyed your groups before, and you had this on the Facebook group, and I thought, that sounds so interesting. I'm going to make an effort to get there. So thank you. Thank you for all you do, by the way.
Thank you very much, Lynn. I think always people who come to a particular event turn out to have something to do with the topic. So the reason why I chose your chart was mostly this direct, and we can see very clearly in this chart that the sun is very important. So yeah, maybe that's why you found it interesting. Stephen, yes?
Yes, Lynn, I'll share some comments and perspective of what you have already shared. The first thing that impressed me is you made a passing reference about being involved with Akashic readings.
Yes.
And also you made mention that now your current husband is very supportive of the work you do.
The perfect relationship, he died. So I'm not in anything.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Yeah.
The question I was going to ask was, well, and this second man, did you have his natal chart? And
Oh, yes.
did he participate in the natal understanding, and more significantly in the interaction with you as far as being supportive of this energetic field work you're doing with Akashic Records?
Totally supportive of everything. And when his Saturn, now I use him in classes as a really good example, because I do teach astrology stuff, a good example of how Saturn a difficult aspect from Saturn can be used well. His Saturn squares my sun. And one can think, and we have really great aspects between us otherwise. And when I saw that, and I really didn't see it right away, I thought, wow, that's amazing, because I don't feel he stifles me at all. But how I realized he used it, I was totally obnoxious with a group of, really what I would normally refer to as a total asshole one night with a bunch of friends. And he said to me later, you are better than how you behaved. You should be paying attention, because that was terrible. You owe people an apology, and you are better than that. Stop being an ass. And I thought, that is a good Saturn square to my sun.
Yeah.
A positive usage of it. It could be, I'm stifling you. My ex-husband's Saturn was on my Venus and Moon. Did not work well for me, because he did actually stifle as much as he could. And so I saw, it was nice to see a positive, difficult Saturn connection to my sun.
Yeah, sometimes having criticism is the best thing we can wish for.
Yeah, and it was criticism, but it was criticism for the good.
Yeah.
And stifling my bad behavior, which I don't do often, but I even when I was behaving so horribly, I knew that I was behaving horribly, but I did it anyways. Every once in a while one does that. So yeah, Stephen, I'm sorry to have cut you off, but I did want to respond to that.
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit more about this, your involvement with the Akashic readings.
Okay.
Because looking at your natal chart, you're coming up on your 75th birthday.
Yeah.
And in that particular regard, that just puts you about, within the decade of your return of Uranus in that 12th house in Cancer.
Yeah.
So the idea of what's striking me about age-related changes is the perspective of living between a biological orientation of life, meaning as far as relationships go, but the idea now of getting involved in a psycho-spiritual expression of your sense of self that you said you had a realization of at a very early time. Mm-hmm. So in this particular regard, I was just curious about your involvement with self-induced trance states prior to going to sleep, utilizing the potencies and the energizations of your chart in terms of setting yourself in a non-dualistic mode of perception, so that those records kind of open up. Because you got your sun in the Scorpio, you got the Uranus in Cancer, and the idea of this Akashic records, going back to what you were referring to, Radlina, about nodes, the idea of Pisces being related to the historian, much in the same way as Virgo is kind of like to the recorder. So the idea of having you being opened up in a way of this very watering type of thing. Because you're aware of Rudolf Steiner, very strong Pisces sun. And as far as following any literature about the Akashic records, I'll always go to see what he writes first. So I was just curious about how you now entering this phase of your life now, this decade now between 75 and 85, how are you going to look at your own chart to enhance your potencies in terms of being able to touch that screen?
That's a very good question. I'm actually at the point right now, I have Neptune hitting my midheaven, transiting Neptune.
I was just pointing to that, yeah.
And opposing the moon and Venus back and forth. And I'm finding that this is really working out as I am questioning where I want to go with what I do. And I've been doing the records for a very long time. So that's not anywhere new for me. But I'm feeling in many ways that I need to pull back from interacting on that level. I don't really promote myself too much. So I look for, or I am approached by people who find me through referrals or meeting me somewhere and blah, blah, blah. So I don't do a lot of readings. They do these days, astrological or Akashic, they take a lot out of me. And so I'm starting to think, what I'd really like to do is nothing and just read books and enjoy learning and, meeting with my friends and different astrology groups that I belong to and, doing all this and really retreating even more from interacting with a lot of people in any way. But I'll still do readings if somebody asks me because I feel that it really helps them. It's always been amazing to me how you can, it takes away some of the burdens that people are going through at the time if you can explain to them why they're going through it and what it has to do with helping them to grow and become more of who they are. So I don't know if I've actually addressed what you said, but I'm feeling more like I would like to retreat. And that is the Neptune, I'm sure.
No, thank you. You answered that very well because I was curious about how you were elaborating this earlier practice of your life. Because as you said, you just mentioned it in passing, but for me, it was like, boom, it lit up. Okay, well, I want to ask her about that because the way you have the awareness of your chart, plus the idea of your birthdays, because I'm a 72-year-old guy, and I've certainly noticed that my earlier youthful enthusiasm about being involved is that now I'm becoming more reclusive, not seclusive, but reclusive. I'm choosing to have a more quieter, reflective pause within the living of my own life and the awareness of that life being lived.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would like to throw something else in with the Neptune. A few years back when Neptune was trining my ascendant, and I thought, well, that's lovely. It's a trine. It was awful, just awful. I just felt totally like I had no idea what was going on anymore. And, you'd think it would be nice being a trine, but it wasn't. So I'm getting to dislike Neptune in a way I never thought I would.
Mm-hmm. Lynn, just to tell you something else, I haven't prepared to show you guys today the progressions in transits like last time, but I just took a look. I was curious, where is the progressed moon right now? And in the context, yes, well, not just that, but because it's in Gemini, it's in the 12th house of the chart. So the progressed moon is transiting the 12th house and will be for a while. That thing, plus the fact, what you mentioned about where Neptune is at the moment, at the end of Pisces, and that's opposite your moon, Venus. So basically, that shows me this is a Piscean stage, a Neptunian Piscean temporary state of affairs. Mm-hmm. And probably in about, so it's actually not, it's about to enter the 12th house. Maybe that's why you're feeling more the urge to be inclusive. Yeah. So we're talking about just over almost 3 years from now, when the progressed moon is expected to cross the ascendant. And I guess at that time, you might renew your efforts in a new way.
I have to think back to what was going on with me when the progressed moon was in the 12th house before.
Yeah,
So
that's another option. Yeah, because it will
was.
make sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. And progressions can reveal so much about this, the
So
current
much.
affairs.
So much.
And
I will tell you
especially-
that during the period, the 30 years in which I had a progressed sun in Sagittarius, the work I was doing, I'd have a day planned and it would blow up and I'd be like, oh, good, this is fun. I never know what's going to happen. And then all of a sudden, one day I was like, you know what? I need to make some changes here. I want to know when I'm going to be doing this. I need some boundaries. And I thought, oh my God, I better check my progressions. Boom, 0, Capricorn. My progressed sun,
that
0.
works amazingly accurately, isn't it? It's just
Amazing. Yes.
unbelievable.
And so I've sort of tightened up my boundaries with that.
Well, you have in a way become a bit more Capricornian, solarly speaking, since that moment. So we can expect that part of why people are expecting responsibility comes from there. And also you've got the descendant in Capricorn. So it kind of makes sense to have either people in your life who once in a while at least play the Saturnian role, like your partner did, playing that Saturn square, but others as well, and also expecting it from you.
Yeah.
To be Saturn. Yeah. Okay. There was something else which I totally forgot that I wanted to mention.
Well, I'll just throw in with the good partner, Pisces sun, Capricorn rising. We had the reversed ascendants and a Cancer moon. So
interesting.
yeah, our moons were sextiled, and our Venuses were trined within a degree. It's just so really easy and wonderful.
And which house was his Pisces sun in?
In the second, and it was he also had a Pisces Mercury. The Mercuries were the big problem because they were in conjunct. And once I started to realize that's the difficulty, this was before we became a couple. I'd known him for many years. We need to understand how each of us communicates because we misinterpret.
And you have a stationary Mercury yourself.
Yeah. So, so I explained to him what that was about, and that until we got comfortable and had everything in place, when you think, because he would say something and I'd take offense at it, and he didn't mean it that way, but that's how I heard it. So I said, from now on, let's deal with this in a way. You say something, and if it upsets me, I'm going to tell you what I heard you say. And he would invariably say, that isn't what I said. And that's what I heard. So we need to do something so that we're communicating in ways that both of us are okay with. And eventually that was fine.
Was it with the Mercury in Pisces that very often there was like an abstract part of the conversation, which he was assuming you're getting in a particular way, where actually you needed more definition?
Yeah. And he had a Mercury retrograde as well. What's interesting too about him, I met him the first time when I was 17 years old and he was 19. And then many years later, we reconnected. But he was born on the same day, same year as my oldest best friend. Just exactly to the minute, exactly 17 hours apart.
Any connections between your notes and his chart?
I have to think about that. I'm sorry, I just can't remember all the parts.
That's fine. I mean, just the moment you said there was more than one case of a particular arrangement that
his nodes are in Gemini as the north node and Sag as the south. And
what I mean is your notes with his chart.
I'm trying to I don't think so. Oh, wait. Yeah. Okay.
Either the Taurus, Scorpio, or the Leo Aquarius axis. One of the two.
And just with his Saturn squares my nodes as well, because it squares my sun. Yeah. So definitely in that respect.
Okay. Well,
so, as karmic growth was definitely a part of our relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are no coincidental relationships, isn't it?
Yeah.
There is always a reason why, especially when things get a bit more deeper and more serious. So yeah, and the connection between a Pisces sun and a Scorpio sun, if we go back to the topic of the sun, even though we said it's not a relationship planet, but it's not so much that you're relating through your suns, but isn't there this natural appreciation of the watery sun? Like you can imagine what it is to be in the shoes of the other person.
Yes.
And that helps as well, like a more distanced understanding, not an emotional bond as much as, even though you might have had an emotional bond because of other things in the charts, but just looking at the two suns, I think it's not to be totally kind of disregarded. When people ask me, usually when people don't know much about astrology, but am I compatible being so and so with someone that's so and so, and they only quote the sun signs, and yeah, there is at least a little bit of truth to sun sign compatibility.
But it bothers me. I agree with you when people say, "Oh, I can't because of that," or "How could they be together?" Well, there's so much more that can pull them.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But no, it was easy in that once we figured out who we were to each other and that we were going to be in this relationship and it was permanent, it just flowed. It was really lovely.
Yes. The reason I'm saying that also is because the sun, something we didn't mention, is very idealistic usually, and even if it doesn't know it. There is this idealistic, maybe prejudice even we can say, inside each one of us, which is connected to the sun sign. Certain things in life that we gravitate around or we are more willing to tolerate than other things. Certain modes of operation which we feel more even more understanding than others. So if another person has a sun in the same element as us, I think we are more in a position to sympathize with their personality, in a grown-up way, in a conscious way.
I agree with you.
It's not about he or she makes me feel good in a lunar way, or I'm attracted in a Mars and Venus way. It's something more. It's like, I know what this is about.
Understood.
Yeah, understood. Yeah. And isn't it so important also in a relationship to be understood, not just loved? Like blindly loved, many people could be.
And I've always said to people, you can be madly in love and truly in love, but if you don't fit, it isn't going to work.
Yes. Or if there is not this natural respect to the other person's core personality, even if it happens to be different from yours, then it just they might feel very lonely. The sun actually feels very lonely. That's one of the loneliest parts of us, the sun, as it's supposed to follow a path which requires a bit of distancing and self-definition, as a contrast to other things in life. But also it's very difficult to find people who support you really in your sun.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And I apologize to everybody else that this had to be all about me. But since Wendy didn't show up.
Yes, well, I promise you I was going to stop earlier as well, but I think the conversation was interesting enough, and your example. So it doesn't necessarily have to be two examples. It's just the way it happened today. Thank you very much for all you shared about your personal life and everything else. And I hope it was interesting for you guys as an example as well of a strong sun. What would you say, Stephen?
No, I was still muted. I wasn't going to add anything.
Now you're muted again. You didn't want to say anything. You just, okay, no problem at all. All right, well, I think we are at the end of it today. Anyone wants to say something, comment, ask, whatever, before we say goodbye? Maybe I should stop the share now. Okay, well, if that's the end of today, I would just invite you to come again if you're interested in 2 weeks. At the moment, I don't remember what was my next topic, but you'll hear about it. I've already kind of set them all up until the end of the year. So you would receive another email from me probably next week with the next event. And the recording of that one will be available on the page as always. So you can, but you would receive the recording. Yeah, so you would receive the link to the recording and then another invitation to maybe share it with someone else that hasn't been here with us today but wants to watch it. And yeah, that's how it works. Thanks
Thank
again.
you very much, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
Have a good evening, and I'll hope to see you again soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.